And what if the love you attract has nothing to do with luck or chance? What if every person who enters your emotional life is there for a deeper reason than you imagine? Carl Jung didn't see love as a simple coincidence between two beings. For him, the love you attract, especially the love that confuses you, hurts you, or obsesses you, is a psychic mirror. Not just any mirror, but one that shows you the parts of yourself you don't want to see, that you've repressed, or still haven't integrated. That's how the shadow works. This key concept in Jungian psychology: everything you don't acknowledge in yourself ends up projected onto others, not just anyone, but precisely those who stir intense emotions, awaken your insecurities, trigger your need to control, or your impulse to run. Because love, the kind that shows up when you least expect it, often comes disguised as opportunity. But in truth, it's a message from your unconscious, a kind of uncomfortable teacher that doesn't speak with words, but with reactions, wounds, and repeated patterns. When someone comes into your life and seems to touch exactly where it hurts most, they're not destroying you. They're pointing at something that was already there, something you hadn't wanted to see. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And in the realm of love, that darkness often shows up as dependency, fear of abandonment, the need for validation, or attraction to emotionally unavailable people. It's no accident that you fall for someone who doesn't choose you. It's no coincidence you keep ending up in relationships that leave you empty. There's a pattern there, and that pattern doesn't break with more love from the outside, but with deeper awareness within. Because love doesn't fix your wounds, it reveals them. Imagine that every person you've loved represents a part of you, not literally, but symbolically. The cold person who doesn't respond emotionally might reflect your own difficulty in embracing vulnerability. The controlling person might mirror your own need to control how you feel. Even the one who seemed perfect and then betrayed you might be showing you a part of yourself that idealizes, that gives too much to others, that hasn't yet learned how to hold itself without falling apart. You don't attract these people as punishment or karma. You attract them because they align energetically, emotionally, and psychically with unresolved parts of your story. Relationships aren't just emotional connections. They're stages where your unconscious speaks, and it speaks loudly. That's why when a relationship shakes you, don't first ask, why did they do this to me? Ask instead, why did I allow this? What part of me was seeking this experience? What is this wound trying to tell me? It's not easy to look inward. It's far more comfortable to blame the other person, to label them as narcissistic, avoidant, or selfish. But as long as you keep placing all responsibility outside, you'll keep repeating the same type of bond over and over. The face might change, the name might change, but the script will stay the same. Because the love you haven't healed, you'll keep reliving until you learn what it came to teach you. Jung understood that every relationship is also an initiation path. Not every person arrives to stay, but every person arrives to show you something. Some show you what you deserve, others show you what you still tolerate. Some lift you, others break you. But even in the pain there is wisdom. Even in the chaos, there are messages from your soul. And that's what most people don't want to see. That behind every intense attraction, every romantic obsession, there's an echo from your personal history crying out to be heard. Sometimes you cling to someone not because you truly love them, but because your wound recognizes them. Not because they are your destiny, but because they are a fragment of your shadow come to life. And instead of facing it, you romanticize it, justify it, idealize it. When someone activates your deepest fears, don't run right away. Observe, feel, listen. What is your body telling you? Does it tense up, contract, panic? Does it need constant reassurance from the other? None of that speaks about them. It speaks about you. And here lies the paradox. The more deeply you know yourself, the more the kind of love you attract begins to change. Not because magically better people appear, but because you no longer resonate with what you once called love, but was actually lack. You'll no longer mistake intensity for connection, control for commitment, anxiety for desire. You'll learn to see beyond appearances, and most importantly, you'll learn to say no where you once stayed silent out of fear of losing. But to get to that place, you have to walk through the dark forest of self-discovery. You have to find the courage to look back without victimhood, look inward without judgment, and look forward without illusion. Because true love, the one that isn't rooted in need or dependency, isn't found. It's built inside you. And only when you learn to love your broken parts will you stop searching for someone else to fix them. There's a quiet moment, almost imperceptible, when something inside you chooses. It chooses without you realizing it. It chooses who to look at with interest, who to open up to emotionally, who to let into your inner world. And no, it's not your conscious mind choosing. It's that older part of you, the one that's been storing memories, unresolved pain, inherited beliefs, and hidden expectations long before you even knew what love was. That's why Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you call it fate. It's brutal because it puts the responsibility for our emotional choices right where we least want to see it on ourselves. Most people believe they fall in love because of compatibility, coincidences, or destiny. But the truth is that many times we fall in love with what we lack, with what we secretly wish to become, or with what we're afraid to face. We fall for the freedom we don't allow ourselves, for the power we can't yet own, for the abandonment we've already lived through, for the wounds we haven't healed. The other person appears as a living symbol of something unresolved, and what we often call love is in reality a dance between unmet needs. Each step, each gesture, each silence charged with hidden emotional meaning. You're drawn to their confidence because you doubt yourself. You're drawn to their independence because you tend to neglect your own needs. You're drawn to their distance because deep inside there's an untold story, one where you learned that love is something to beg for, not receive with dignity. Some people enter your life as if they've been waiting for that exact moment. People who seem to read your soul, who awaken your most intense emotions, who quickly become a vital necessity. But what you don't see at first is that this intensity isn't always love. Sometimes it's trauma in disguise. Sometimes it's your nervous system recognizing a familiar pattern. Familiarity, even when painful, often feels like home because deep down you are not looking for another person. You're searching for an emotional experience your body learned early on. If you learned that love was unpredictable, you chase instability. If you learned that love meant pain, you'll cling to the one who hurts you the most. And all of this happens without your awareness because you are not the one choosing your past is. And that's where inner work becomes essential. It's not about avoiding love or closing off emotionally. It's about recognizing which part of you is choosing whom to love. Is it your conscious adult self who knows their worth and sets boundaries? Or is it your wounded inner child still hoping someone will finally see, save, and choose them? When it's the child choosing, love becomes a plea. When it's the adult, love becomes a choice, not a necessity. But to reach that level of awareness, you first have to go through your masks. You have to face your attachments with brutal honesty. You have to admit that many times the other person wasn't cruel. You're the one who placed them on a pedestal they didn't earn. It's hard to admit you were the one who idealized, who ignored the signs, who settled for crumbs, who mistook attention for love. But it's also liberating, because once you accept your role in the story, you regain the power you gave away. You stop seeing love as something that just happens to you, and start seeing it as something you also shape, allow, and build. That changes everything. It changes the kind of conversations you have. It changes the boundaries you set. It changes how you see others. You no longer need constant validation. You stop expecting someone else to fix you. You become an emotionally solid space. And from there, love stops being a roller coaster and becomes a bridge. But that doesn't mean love loses its intensity. On the contrary, it becomes more real, more honest, more human. Because now it doesn't come from fear. It comes from connection, from mutual recognition, from two people who don't need each other to survive, but who choose to walk the path together. And that's only possible when you stop attracting from your wounds and begin to vibrate from your healing. The quality of the love you receive is deeply connected to the quality of the relationship you have with yourself, your boundaries, your self-image, your ability to be alone without feeling empty. All of that shows in how love arrives. You knew it. Love isn't blind. It's deeply revealing. It doesn't come to fill holes. It comes to expose them. It doesn't bring answers. It brings the questions you've been avoiding for years. And that's where many people run. Because conscious love demands emotional maturity. It requires letting go of the fantasy that someone else will complete you. It means setting aside naive romanticism to embrace a deeper truth that real love begins where need ends. Only when you can hold yourself fully can you finally open up to a love that's not a repetition of your voids, but an expansion of your being. Sometimes we think love is luck, a coincidence, a gift from fate. But Jung invites us to look beyond that charming surface. He tells us with elegant bluntness that the love we attract is a mirror not of what we want, but of who we are deep inside. And while that sounds poetic, it's also unsettling. Because if the love you attract is dishonest, absent, abusive, or unstable, what does that say about you? Not in terms of blame, but in terms of awareness. No one chooses to be hurt, but many unconsciously choose someone who already knows how to do it, because it feels familiar, because painful as it is to admit. It fits an internal narrative we've been repeating for years. When you start to observe the patterns in your relationships, certain echoes appear, repetitions, similar figures with different faces, situations that change scenery but led to the same emotional place. And in that place, that invisible space between longing and pain, lives the true root of what we attract. You attract what you believe you deserve, even if you are not aware of that belief. You attract from the energy you radiate when you're alone, from how you talk to yourself when no one's listening, from how you handle your emptiness, from your level of self-acceptance. The other person simply responds to the unspoken call you send out. That's why some people, without realizing it, become magnets for unbalanced relationships. Not because they want them, but because they don't know themselves well enough to protect themselves from what harms them. And that's the key. The love you attract reflects your level of self-knowledge. It's not about beauty or intelligence or even kindness. It's about your emotional vibration, about what your unconscious permits and normalizes, about the stories inside you that still haven't been voiced. So love isn't just a connection with another. It's a tool of revelation. It's how life shows you your edges. The other person becomes the stage where your wounds make their entrance. That's why we often love with fear, urgency, and dependence. Because we're not loving from wholeness. We're loving from lack. From the illusion that someone else will heal a wound we haven't even named. But love can't heal what you're unwilling to face. It can't. The best it can do is shake you, show you, expose you. Then it's up to you to use the mirror or shatter it. There's a widely held belief that love justifies everything. That if it hurts, it's because it's deep. That if it consumes you, it must be real. But Jung didn't see it that way. To him, real love doesn't break you into pieces. It brings you together. It doesn't leave you in ruins. It pushes you toward wholeness. And that wholeness means seeing not only your light, but also your shadow, your jealousy, your fears, your need to control your insecurities. Because love brings not only the best in you to the surface, but also what you've kept hidden. And instead of being a tragedy, that can become an opportunity. An opportunity to turn the unconscious into the conscious. Transform the bond into a path to use the relationship not as a shelter, but as a school. But that takes courage, because once you realize that the love you attract isn't a coincidence, but a reflection, you can't keep blaming the other person. You can't keep running from yourself. You have to stop and look within. What part of you chose to stay where it wasn't seen? What part of you felt comfortable in the absence? What part of you believed it didn't deserve more? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary because the answer was never outside. It never was. And until you do that inner work, you'll keep attracting the same kind of love over and over again. The names will change, the bodies, the promises, but the core will remain the same. Because the script hasn't changed, and only you can rewrite it. Not with empty affirmations or surface-level self-help, but with an honest, deep exploration of your emotional history, your childhood, your earliest bonds, your beliefs about love. Because that's where it all begins. That's where the pattern is formed. And unless you return to that origin, you'll keep playing the same melody, even if the song changes. The love you attract is no coincidence. It's a letter written by your unconscious and sent to the universe without your knowing. Every time you enter a relationship, you're revealing something about yourself. Something you may not want to see. Something that needs to be loved. Yes, but first by you. Because no one can give you the love you deny yourself. No one can respect you if you don't place yourself where you deserve to be. No one can save you from what you're unwilling to let go of. Love isn't magic. It's revelation. It's a subtle, precise mirror. And when you finally learn to look at yourself without fear, the mirror no longer reflects lack. It reflects presence. It reflects truth. There's something deeply revealing about watching how someone loves when they're no longer trying to impress. When the game of seduction has ended and only what's raw, real, and inevitable remains right there in that exact moment where love stops being a promise and becomes a daily act. The true emotional structure of a person is exposed. Jung understood that there's no more direct way to know someone's soul than through the kind of love they're capable of sustaining. Because it's not just about who you choose to love. It's about how you love, where you love from, and what you're willing to face within yourself for that love. Many people search in love for an escape, a way to avoid facing their emptiness, their insecurity, that inner voice constantly whispering they're not enough. So they project onto the other person an idealized image, a savior meant to fill all their gaps. But that projection, as Jung warned, is not real love. It's an illusion, a shadow wearing the mask of desire. Because when you love someone, not for who they are, but for what they represent to you, you're not really loving. You are using, and that way of relating, though socially accepted, always ends in disappointment. Because no human being can carry forever the burden of being someone else's salvation. And here comes another unsettling truth. The love you attract doesn't depend on what you say you want, but on what your unconscious needs to resolve. You attract the one who, without knowing, matches perfectly with your unresolved wounds. And often that means you're drawn to someone emotionally unavailable, because you've learned to protect yourself by not fully connecting. Or you fall for someone who doesn't choose you, because on a deeper level, you haven't fully chosen yourself. Love then becomes a symbolic battlefield where your desires clash with your traumas, your longing for connection with your fear of losing control. When someone is at peace with themselves, the way they love changes. They no longer seek validation nor try to dominate, nor allow themselves to be dominated. They love from freedom, not from need. They don't cling, don't manipulate, don't constantly demand proof of love, because they understand that love is not a power struggle, but a meeting between two whole worlds, not two broken halves. And that's why the more you work on yourself, the more the kind of love you attract changes, because you stop searching for broken mirrors to reflect your pain and start resonating with those who walk with their shadow in plain sight, not hidden. The process isn't linear. Sometimes you think you've healed and you fall again into the same patterns, because the unconscious doesn't give up its secrets so easily. It protects, it hides, it tests you. And each relationship you experience is an opportunity to see more clearly, to ask yourself not only what you are looking for in the other, but what you're refusing to give yourself. Because there is no bond more dangerous than the one built on the hope that someone else will come and fix your story. That hope, though sweet, is poisonous because it turns love into a debt. And love born from debt always becomes an act of survival, not of fulfillment. Jung spoke of individuation as the path to becoming whole. A process where you reconcile with all parts of yourself, both the ones you're proud to show and those you hide, even from yourself. And love plays an essential role in that journey. Not because it's the destination, but because it's the place where your unhealed parts surface. Love makes you vulnerable. It forces you to drop your defenses and let someone see your chaos. In that emotional nakedness, what remains unhealed begins to emerge. It's no coincidence that the people most afraid of love are often those most afraid of facing themselves. Because deep down, even if they never say it, they know that loving someone for real means letting your soul be seen. Not your ego, not your persona, your soul. That's why when you analyze the love you attract, you're engaging in a deep act of self-discovery. You're looking into the most honest mirror there is. And even though it might hurt, it can also set you free, because it reveals parts of you that you didn't even know were there. It confronts you with your limits, your contradictions, your hidden attachments. But it also gives you the chance to choose differently, to heal, to break the cycle. Because once you see the pattern, you can no longer pretend you don't. You hold the power, even if not always, the courage to choose another path. And that's when love stops being random and becomes a conscious act. You no longer love out of hunger but from abundance. You no longer choose from emptiness but from clarity. You no longer attract to fill a void but to share your fullness. But to get there, you have to walk through the fire, through the discomfort of looking within, through the bravery of admitting that you too have hurt others, that you too have chosen poorly, that you too have accepted less than you deserved. Because the love you attract isn't just a story with another person. It's the silent language your soul uses to talk about you. It's easy to say we deserve great love, a mature, conscious, deep love. We repeat it like a mantra. We wish for it in secret. We visualize it as if it will appear by magic. But the question Jung would have us ask isn't what kind of love you want, but what kind of love you're capable of sustaining. Because attracting something is only part of the process. The real challenge is holding onto it, facing what it awakens in you, and not sabotaging it when it begins to stir parts of you you'd rather keep asleep. What many call true love is often just the reflection of a relationship where both people have done the inner work needed to avoid using each other as a substitute for their emptiness. Sometimes the love you attract is intense, but not healthy. It consumes you, pulls you in, obsesses you, and even if you mistake it for passion or depth, it's still a form of suffering disguised as connection. Jung explained that these intense relationships often stem from a powerful projection of thema or animus, internal figures that represent the unconscious feminine or masculine side of our psyche. When we meet someone who embodies these archetypes, we feel an overwhelming, almost magical attraction. But we're not really seeing the other person. We're seeing a part of ourselves projected outward. We fall in love with an image we've created, not with the real person. And when that image inevitably shatters, we're left devastated not by the loss of the other, but by the collapse of the fantasy. That's why so often when someone leaves or a relationship ends, it feels like something essential has been ripped from us. Not because that person truly belonged to us, but because we had assigned them an emotional role we thought was vital. What hurts isn't really their absence, but having to face what their presence was covering up inside us. Loneliness, fear, insecurity. Jung said it clearly. What you don't make conscious becomes your fate. And when it comes to love, the unconscious manifests as repeated patterns. Relationships with different faces, but the same wounds until you decide to look within. The love you attract once you've begun to wake up, to heal, to ask deep questions is very different. It's no longer built on promises or inflated expectations. You don't need someone to complete you because you've stopped believing you were broken. You no longer crave a savior because you've learned to rescue yourself. And in that new inner state, the energy you emit changes drastically. And with it, the kind of love that starts to gravitate toward you. It's a love that doesn't require masks or games, that doesn't depend on external validation or control. It's a love that simply allows itself to exist. But even that healthier, more balanced love can feel uncomfortable because it doesn't run on the adrenaline of drama, but on peace. And for someone who's lived in chaos, peace can feel like emptiness. Stillness is confused with boredom, maturity with lack of emotion. And many people end up sabotaging these relationships, not because they aren't real, but because they don't know how to receive something that doesn't activate their alarm system, that doesn't force them to be in constant emotional survival mode. Jung understood that what's familiar, even if painful, can feel safer than the unknown. That's why inner work isn't just about healing old wounds. It's also about learning how to receive love without fear. There's something deeply transformative in observing someone who's already gone through this process. They don't chase, they don't run, they don't idealize. They love with their feet on the ground and their soul wide open. They know love isn't always perfect, but that the imperfect can also be beautiful when there's awareness. They don't try to change the other person or lose themselves adapting. They find a middle ground between the I and the WI. And from there they build with patience, with truth, with humanity. When you reach this point, love stops being an obsession and becomes a daily choice. You choose to stay, to choose the other person, but without abandoning yourself. Not because it's easy, but because you understand that the deepest love is the one that honors the other's freedom without feeling threatened by it. And that only happens when you no longer live in fear of being left, not being enough, or ending up alone. The love you attract is directly tied to the relationship you have with yourself. And that relationship, even if no one else sees it, says everything. There's no magic formula for this. No universal steps or precise timelines. It's an inner path, intimate, often lonely. But every time you choose to see yourself honestly, every time you face a part of you that you once denied, you take one step closer to the possibility of loving from an authentic place. And then when you least expect it, someone appears not to save you, but to walk beside you. Not as a destination, but as a fellow traveler. And that kind of love doesn't scream or make promises, but it transforms, not by what it gives, but by what it awakens inside you. There comes a moment in life when you realize it's no coincidence the kind of love you attract. That moment doesn't always arrive quietly. Often it crashes in like emotional collapse. When a relationship you thought was meaningful falls apart, or when you repeat the same pattern again without knowing why. That's when the mirror breaks and you begin to see what's really behind your choices. Jung believed we don't attract what we want, but what we are. And though that may be uncomfortable, it's also an invitation to look where it hurts the most within. Because behind every unfulfilled love story, every bond that makes you feel small, every excessive giving that leaves you empty, there's an untold story between you and yourself, a part you've avoided facing. The child who wasn't seen, the teen who learned to stay silent to be loved, the adult still chasing approval in unfamiliar faces. And when that story remains unknown, sleeping in the unconscious, it starts to express itself in the people around you, especially in those to whom you feel an irresistible pull. Those who ignite something primal, visceral, urgent. But that fire isn't always a sign of compatibility. Often, it's the symptom of an old wound crying out for care. Jung spoke of relationships as mirrors where the soul reveals, reflects, and confronts itself. There is no intimate connection without confrontation, and sometimes love becomes painful precisely because it activates parts of you that you've tried to keep under control. Jealousy, insecurity, fear of abandonment, the urge to dominate or be dominated. All those things you'd rather hide show up in love, and if you're unwilling to face them, you'll repeat the same story over and over. Then you wonder, why do I always choose people who aren't available? Why do I fall for those who don't love me? Why is it so hard to maintain a healthy relationship? And the answer rarely lies outside. It's in that hidden inner corner, still operating on beliefs you took in without question. Maybe you learned love is pain, that you must earn it, that you only deserve it if you sacrifice. Maybe you've tied passion to chaos, distance to desire, coldness to mystery, and without realizing it, those invisible codes shape your emotional world. The hardest part isn't attracting someone who can love you well. The hardest part is believing you deserve that love. Because when you haven't done the inner work, healthy love can feel foreign. And without knowing why, you start to reject it, sabotage it, put up walls, as if your emotional system doesn't know how to handle something not rooted in lack. Jung said, the soul needs conflict to grow, and it's in that tension between what's dying and what wants to be born that true transformation begins. But no one can walk that path for you. You can read, listen, reflect. But the moment will come when you have to sit with yourself in silence and ask, what am I really seeking in others? Love or an escape from my pain? Connection or validation for my ego? Companionship or shelter from my loneliness? The answers won't come right away. They'll arrive in fragments. Sometimes as memories, sometimes as tears you didn't know you were holding. But they will come, and when they do, you will start to see things more clearly. You'll stop looking at love as a lifeline and start seeing it as expansion. You won't lose yourself in someone else's eyes hoping they give you an identity, because you already know who you are. And from that place, everything changes. The way you choose, what you tolerate, what you give, what you allow. Yes, at first, you might feel lonelier because as you heal, you stop fitting into dynamics that once felt familiar. But that loneliness isn't punishment. It's cleansing. It's space. It's preparation for something real. And when real love arrives, it won't be perfect. It won't rescue you from yourself. It won't fill all your emptiness. But it will invite you to walk with more awareness, to share from abundance, not need, to see the other as whole, not as a project to fix. You'll realize it's not just about who you attract, but how you show up in the relationship. Not from scarcity, but from presence. Not to fill a void, but to celebrate a meeting. At that level, love isn't drama or spectacle. It's depth, it's tenderness, it's courage. It's holding the other without letting go of yourself. And that only happens when you stop living on autopilot and begin choosing with a conscious soul, because the love you attract will always be a mirror. The question is, are you ready to see what it reflects? When Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, he wasn't only referring to the personal healing journey. He was also speaking about the space where love is born and grows. Because true love doesn't bloom on the surface of the personality we present to the world, but in the depths where the unspoken resides, where denial lives, where we hide what we're afraid to reveal. And it's in that space where your real self starts to emerge, shaped by the kind of love you attract. Maybe you love someone with a depth you still can't explain. Maybe you gave all you had, even parts of yourself you shouldn't have given. Maybe you forgave, justified, dreamed, and wore yourself out. And now looking back, you can't quite grasp how you got there. But Jung helps us understand that every bond reflects the primary bond we have with ourselves. It's not about blame. It's about honest observation. What part of me thought that was love? Many of us carry a silent wound screaming, "Love me the way I was never loved," That wound becomes a radar, a compass. It pulls you toward what's familiar, even when it hurts. And so you end up chasing those who reject you, idealizing those who don't see you, desiring those who never stay. Because in that unconscious repetition lives a childlike hope that this time it will be different. But it won't until you realize that the other person didn't come to complete you. They came to show you just how incomplete you are with yourself. That's the hidden beauty of love. Even when it seems to fail, it's doing something sacred. It's revealing you to yourself. It shows you your shadows, teaches you your limits, and exposes your patterns. No connection leaves no mark. But no mark can't be turned into awareness if you're willing to look deep. Why am I drawn to cold people? Why do I end up in impossible relationships? Why do I run when someone loves me well? These questions aren't about finding someone to blame. They're about awakening. And once you wake up, you begin to understand that the love you deserve won't come to rescue you from your emptiness. It will find you when you've made peace with it. Because as long as you're running from your own loneliness, your silence, your truth, you'll keep attracting love that confirms what you already believe about yourself. That you're not enough, that you have to earn love, that you must wait, that you have to settle. But all of that is an illusion built on wounded self-esteem. Real love doesn't exist in illusion. It lives in presence. Jung said that what you don't make conscious will appear in your life as fate. And in love, that fate plays out as a cycle. Attraction, euphoria, disappointment, emptiness, repeating endlessly until you stop. Until you stop searching outward for answers and begin looking inward. That's where it all begins. Because when you heal, your energy changes, and so does the kind of people you let into your life. You no longer attract from lack, but from emotional abundance. And that feels different. It shows. It lives in you differently. But there's no instant magic. It's a process. There are nights of doubt, uncomfortable solitude, setbacks, nostalgia for what once was. And all of that is part of the journey too. Because you can't truly love if you haven't faced your own abyss. You can't hold someone else if you haven't learned how to hold yourself. You can't say, I choose you from freedom, unless you've chosen yourself first with your light and your shadow, with your wounds and your strength. And when that day comes, you no longer need love to be perfect. You need it to be real, to have truth, to have reciprocity, to have space, to be without masks or games. And for that to be possible, you must have first let go of the masks you wore to be loved. Because love isn't a stage where you perform a role. It's a temple where you meet another human being willing to see you and be seen. The most revealing thing about love isn't what the other does or doesn't do. It's what it awakens in you, what it triggers, what makes you uncomfortable, what transforms you. That's why love is a doorway into the deepest parts of your psyche. And if you walk through it with your eyes open, you'll discover that every relationship was a message, a teacher, a mirror. Some showed you your darkness, others your light, but all brought you closer to yourself. And that may be the highest purpose of love. Because in the end, it's not about how many times your heart was broken. It's about how many times you returned to yourself. How many times you chose not to shut down. How many times you decided to keep loving without losing yourself. And that's only possible when you understand that the love you attract isn't random. It's an echo of your internal state. It's the consequence of your beliefs, your wounds, your emotional history, and also of your level of awareness. The love you attract reveals who you are, but it can also reveal who you're willing to become. Because every relationship, no matter how painful, has the potential to push you toward a more authentic, more free, more awake version of yourself. And when you choose that path, something within you changes forever. Love is one of the most mysterious forces of human existence. You don't choose who to love with logic, and you don't measure love with reason. It's a current that flows from a more ancient, more primal, more intimate place. Carl Jung understood that this force not only connects to people, it also exposes the most hidden parts of the soul. There's no deep bond without transformation. And every time you surrender to love, you're opening a door to something far greater than yourself. Some people enter your life with a disarming sweetness, but also with surgical precision, touching exactly your deepest insecurities. It's not coincidence. It's synchronicity. It's the symbolic language of the unconscious, showing you that there's still work to be done. Maybe you've wondered why you always end up with emotionally unavailable people, or why it scares you when someone loves you unconditionally. And while it might seem unfair, the answer isn't in the other person. It's in what still lives inside of you. Jung spoke of the anima and animus as the inner representations of the feminine and masculine soul within each individual. These figures, shaped by experience and culture, deeply influence the type of partner you're drawn to. It's not just about taste or compatibility. It's about unconscious projection. You see in the other what you feel is missing in you. You idealize. You dream. You build an image and then suffer when that image falls apart because it was never real. It was a part of you asking to be seen. And it's in that recognition that the real journey begins. Love stops being a battlefield or an urgent need and becomes a practice of self-awareness. You begin to ask, why do I seek validation outside of myself? Why do I confuse intensity with love? Why am I afraid to be seen as I am? And in every answer, there's a seed of liberation. Not because the pain disappears, but because it stops controlling you. Because you no longer need someone else to fill your emptiness. You recognize it. You embrace it. And you stop fearing it. But this awakening isn't easy. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom in a relationship to finally see clearly. Sometimes you need to feel abandonment, betrayal, or indifference. To realize that you've been abandoning yourself your entire life. And even though it hurts, it can also be the breaking point that changes everything. Because the love you deserve doesn't ask you to sacrifice yourself, to hide, or to break to fit in. The love you deserve begins the moment you stop begging for what you should have received from the start. Respect, presence, truth. Jung insisted that the scariest thing isn't facing someone else. It's facing yourself. And that's exactly what real love does. It puts you in front of a mirror. It forces you to see your contradictions, your open wounds, your fears disguised as pride. But it also shows you your infinite capacity to rebuild. Because if you are capable of loving from a place of pain, imagine what you could do from a place of awareness. Then you start looking back, and you understand that every person who crossed your path left something meaningful, a lesson, a reflection, a challenge. Some taught you boundaries, others tenderness. Some woke you up, others broke you so you could be reborn. And that too is love, even if it doesn't seem like it, because it pushed you to know yourself, to care for yourself, to listen to yourself. It brought you back to you. And when you return to yourself, love takes on a new shape. You no longer need to convince anyone to stay. You no longer tolerate crumbs. You are no longer attracted to drama because something inside you has matured. You've reached your emotional depth. And from there, you can build something solid. Not perfect, but real, with presence, with honesty, with the strength to say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm not. And that radically transforms what you attract. Because when you choose yourself, the world starts reflecting that choice. You no longer crave intensity that burns. You see connection that lifts. You stop idealizing. You observe. You stop chasing. You align. And love becomes a sacred space. Not of perfection, but of truth. A place where you can be yourself without fear, and where the other can also show up without masks, without games, with the maturity of someone who knows that love is an act of courage, but also of freedom. And that's when everything clicks. When you realize that the love you attract has nothing to do with luck or blind fate. It has to do with your internal vibration, with your wounds and your choices, with your willingness to grow. Because every love that comes into your life, even the one that ends in tears, comes with a lesson. It comes to show you something you hadn't yet seen. And that is the real magic. Not the fairy tale kind, but the magic of a soul that awakens. When you understand this, you stop blaming. You stop repeating. You stop losing yourself in loves that can't hold you. And you begin to walk with a new awareness, more whole, more awake, more dignified. Because you now know that real love is not a frantic search. It's a natural consequence of your inner journey. And in that journey, every step matters, even the ones you took in the dark. We've reached the end of this journey, but not the end of the search. Because if Carl Jung's psychology has taught us anything, it's that life isn't defined by the answers we get, but by the courage to ask the right questions. And when it comes to love, those questions can shake us to our core. What kind of love am I attracting? What does it reveal about me? Am I really choosing from my essence or from my wounds? These questions are uncomfortable, yes, but also freeing. Throughout this video, we've explored the quietest corners of the soul. Those places where our insecurities hide, where unspoken desires linger, where we project our inner world. Jung didn't teach us to avoid the shadow, but to integrate it. And that includes accepting that the love we attract won't always be pretty or perfect, but it will always show us something. Because every relationship, even the most painful one, gives us a mirror. It reflects back a part of ourselves we might have forgotten or never dared to see. And here's the most powerful part. When you look at that reflection with honesty, something inside you shifts. You start to recognize yourself. You no longer need to fit into what others expect. You are no longer willing to lose yourself for someone else because you realize love isn't blind surrender or salvation or constant suffering. Real love is awareness. It's presence. It's emotional responsibility. And that only happens when you choose yourself first. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you're supposed to be or who you learn to be to survive, but who you're meant to be when you free yourself from fear. And love is part of that path because you can't know your soul if you don't dare to share it. You can't understand your shadow if you don't let someone else reflect it. And you can't rewrite your story unless you allow yourself to feel, to make mistakes, to begin again. Many of us grew up with a version of love that confines us, that makes us believe love means sacrifice, silence, endurance, that suffering is part of the cost. But when you start to see love through the lens of awareness, everything changes. You understand that loving isn't losing yourself, but finding yourself. It's not about filling a void, but sharing your wholeness. It's not about controlling the other, but allowing them to be. And from there, from that place, what you attract changes too. Because the outer world begins to mirror the balance you build within. And what happens when you're not there yet? When you're still attracting relationships that hurt, drain, or harm you, that's also part of the process. You are not failing. You are learning. You are waking up. Because every experience serves a purpose. To push you closer to yourself. To show you what you haven't healed yet. To reveal where you're still hoping someone else gives you what only you can give yourself. And even if it feels repetitive or painful, it's deeply transformative. Sometimes to understand the love you deserve, you have to live through the one you didn't. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Because no one is born knowing how to love consciously. No one grows up without wounds. No one is immune to confusing attachment with love, need with devotion, silence with peace. But when you choose to look with honesty, when you stop blaming the other and take responsibility for yourself, something shifts. And that shift is what sets you free. This video isn't a magic formula. It won't give you all the answers. But if there's one thing to remember, let it be this. The love you attract is an invitation to look within, not as punishment, but as opportunity. Because the love you most long for to be seen, to be valued, to be loved starts the moment you choose to give that to yourself first. And then from that place of wholeness, you begin to attract different relationships. Healthier, more conscious, more real. It's a journey with no finish line. There will always be more layers to uncover, more emotions to integrate, more versions of yourself to embrace. But every step you take toward yourself is a step toward a truer kind of love. Not perfect, not like in the movies, but one where you can breathe in peace. Where you can be yourself without fear, without masks, without needing to prove anything. A love that doesn't demand but supports you. A love that doesn't break you but builds you. And if you ever wonder whether you'll get there, remember this. You already are by looking inward, by asking the hard questions, by seeking deep answers. You are already walking the path. And you are not alone. Millions of souls are on the same journey, stumbling, awakening, starting again. And that too is love. To see ourselves in one another, even when we don't fully understand, even when it hurts. So, thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for allowing yourself to feel, to reflect, to connect. If this video spoke to your heart, if something in you resonated with these words, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so we can continue diving deeper into these topics together. And if you think this could help someone else, don't hesitate to like and share it because we never know who we might reach with just one word. See you in the next video. Until then.